North Atlantic Ocean, July 25, 1956, 11:05 p.m. The fog is thick, so thick you could almost feel it pressing against the glass. Two ships slice through the darkness, guided not by sight, but by faith in their instruments. On one side, the SS Andrea Doria, pride of Italy, a floating cathedral of post-war luxury. On the other, the MS Stockholm, a smaller Swedish liner bound for New York. Neither can see the other. Both believe their radar has them safe. In less than 3 minutes, that illusion will vanish. What followed would become one of the most haunting maritime disasters since the Titanic. This is the story of Andrea Doria. Chapter 1. The Pride of a Nation. It began with a dream. In the early 1950s, Italy was clawing its way out of the ruins of war. Factories rebuilt, cities rose from rubble, and the nation longed for a symbol of rebirth, something that proved Italian craftsmanship could once again stand tall before the world. That symbol was the Andrea Doria. Launched in 1951 and named after a 16th century admiral, she was more than a ship, she was a statement. Her hull was painted a proud silver gray, her decks trimmed with marble and walnut, her dining rooms hung with frescoes. On board, there were swimming pools, art galleries, even a chapel. To Italians, she represented grace, modernity, and national pride. To passengers, she was a promise that the golden age of ocean travel wasn't over yet. But beneath the elegance, there were flaws, design decisions that would later prove fatal. Her lifeboats could not all be launched if the ship listed heavily to one side, and her radar, though advanced for the time, relied entirely on human interpretation. In 1956, radar screens were not digital maps. They were glowing circles of light, green blips, and judgment calls.
Chapter 2. A Voyage Across the Atlantic. July 17, 1956, Genoa, Italy. 1,134 passengers and crew stepped aboard the SS Andrea Doria, bound for New York City. Families, students, immigrants, movie stars. For many, this wasn't just a voyage. It was a symbol of rebirth, a promise that life could begin again on the other side of the Atlantic. At the helm stood Captain Piero Calamai, 58 years old, a man carved by the sea itself. He had served through 2 world wars, survived U-boat patrols, and guided convoys through nights so dark even the stars hid. To his crew, Calamai was a quiet force, disciplined, meticulous, the kind of captain who trusted instruments but never ignored instinct. He believed deeply in the ship beneath his boots, and the Andrea Doria was worthy of that faith. Her hull stretched nearly 700 feet, 11 decks of Italian design and precision, powered by twin turbine engines capable of more than 23 knots, around 42 kilometers per hour. She wasn't the largest liner on the Atlantic, but she was among the most beautiful. Marble staircases, Venetian murals, swimming pools glinting under glass ceilings. The press called her the floating palace of Italy. Every departure from Genoa felt like a parade. Bands played on the pier, flags waved, and Calamai, ever composed, would give a small nod from the bridge, a gesture equal parts duty and pride. For 9 days the voyage unfolded perfectly. Calm seas, elegant dinners, children chasing one another through polished corridors while the horizon stretched endless and blue. But on the 10th night, as the coast of the United States drew near, the air began to thicken. A gray curtain drifted over the water. The sea fell silent. Fog, the kind that blinds even the most seasoned sailor. And for Captain Calamai, it was the beginning of the longest night of his life. Chapter 3. Into the Fog. July 25, 1956, evening. A wall of fog rolled in from the coast of Nantucket. Thick, heavy, silent. The kind that turns the sea into a void where sound dies and light disappears. Captain Calamai ordered the foghorns to sound every 2 minutes, as regulations demanded. He eased the ship's speed, but not by much. The Andrea Doria still had a schedule to keep, and New York awaited at dawn. Far to the northeast, another vessel cut through the same mist, the MS Stockholm, a Swedish passenger liner just leaving New York for home. Her captain, Gunnar Nordenson, had turned in for the night, leaving the bridge under the watch of his young third officer, Karsten Johansson, just 26 years old. Now, 2 ships, one heading west, the other east, were sailing blind in the same fog. Their eyes were no longer human, they were electronic. They both relied on radar, a technology still relatively new at sea. It sent out pulses of radio waves that bounced off other ships and painted tiny glowing blips on a round green screen. But there was a catch. Those screens used a single adjustable range, like zooming in or out on a map. If that setting was wrong, the picture could be deceptive. A ship that seemed far away might, in truth, be terrifyingly close. On the Andrea Doria, the radar showed a small contact about 17 miles out, heading west. On the Stockholm, the officer saw a large ship to his southwest, moving east. Both men studied their scopes. Both believed they understood what they were seeing, and both adjusted course slightly, confident they would pass each other safely, left side to left side. But one of them had the range set incorrectly. He thought the other ship was still miles away. It wasn't. In reality, the 2 liners were already locked on a collision path.
Chapter 4. The Moment of Impact. 11:10 p.m., July 25th, 1956. The Atlantic was pitch black. No stars, no horizon, just fog, a milky wall that swallowed everything. On the Andrea Doria's bridge, Captain Piero Calamai stood tense, staring into the gray nothingness beyond the windows. He knew another ship was out there. The radar said so. The blip was closing fast, maybe too fast. He adjusted course slightly to the left, hoping to widen the gap. It was a maneuver done countless times before. Quiet, routine, automatic. But this time, nothing was routine. On the Stockholm, Third Officer Karsten Johansson watched his own radar. He too turned slightly, to the right. He thought it would give the other ship more room. Neither man realized they had just steered toward each other. Inside the fog, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Crewmen strained their eyes against the glow of their spotlights, seeing only a thick white curtain. And then, out of nowhere, a shadow. The lookouts on the Andrea shouted, "Ship ahead! Right side!" Captain Calamai rushed to the bridge wing and saw it. A dark shape cutting through the mist, its bow glinting under the running lights. He pulled the telegraph to full left, engines to reverse. The Andrea Doria groaned as the massive hull tried to swing away. Seconds later, the Stockholm's sharp icebreaker bow sliced through the fog and straight into the starboard side of the Andrea Doria. A thunderous metallic scream ripped through the ocean. Steel tore open like paper. Cabins collapsed. Bulkheads split. Passengers were thrown from their beds as the ship's lights flickered and dimmed. The Stockholm's bow had crushed deep into the Andrea Doria's side, tearing a hole almost 40 feet wide and 30 feet high. Seawater gushed in instantly, flooding 5 decks below. Within minutes, the Andrea Doria began to list, 15 degrees, then 20. Her starboard side dipped dangerously low, and lifeboats on that side became useless. In the chaos, Captain Calamai ordered watertight doors closed and damage reports sent up. But it was hopeless. Too many compartments had been breached, too much water rushing in too fast. On the Stockholm, the scene was just as grim. Her entire bow was crushed inward, mangled steel curling back like foil. Several crew members in the front cabins were killed instantly. Yet, miraculously, she stayed afloat. Through the fog, the sound of human voices began to rise, cries for help, shouts in Italian, the wail of distant horns. The two ships, locked together for a brief moment in the mist, drifted apart into the darkness. The Andrea Doria was mortally wounded, and the clock had just begun to count down. Chapter 5. Chaos in the Dark. Inside, panic turned to disbelief. Corridors tilted, doors jammed shut. Lights flickered, then went out. Passengers stumbled upward through smoke and seawater as the ship leaned ever more steeply. Captain Calamai fought to assess the damage. 5 watertight compartments were flooding, one more than the ship could survive. The list made it impossible to launch half the lifeboats. He faced an impossible truth. The Andrea Doria was doomed. Above deck, lifeboats on the starboard side dangled uselessly. The ones on the port side hung far out over the water, requiring passengers to climb steeply up the tilted deck to reach them. Some crew members froze. Others acted heroically, lowering children into boats, comforting the elderly, refusing to leave their posts. Through the fog, the faint outline of another ship appeared. The Stockholm, the very vessel that had struck them, now turned back to help. Chapter 6. The Rescue. For the next few hours, the North Atlantic became a scene of desperate coordination. The Stockholm's radios reached other nearby vessels, the Ile-de-France, the Cape Anne, and the William Thomas Powell. Each diverted course, racing through the fog to help. The Andrea Doria was still floating, but barely. Every few minutes, she listed a little more. By 2 a.m., rescue ships began arriving. The French liner Ile-de-France loomed out of the mist, lights blazing like a city at sea. Her crew lowered boats immediately, pulling survivors from the water. One by one, passengers clambered up ropes, carried infants in blankets, and collapsed on the decks of their rescuers. The calm professionalism of those rescuers, many of whom risked their own lives in lifeboats amid debris, saved hundreds. Of the 1,706 souls aboard the Andrea Doria, 1,660 survived. 46 lost their lives, most in the initial collision. Among the survivors was a 14-year-old girl who had been thrown from her bed into the ocean, only to be found floating hours later, alive. Her name was Linda Morgan. The press would later call her the Miracle Girl. Chapter 7. Dawn over the Atlantic. By sunrise, the sea was eerily calm. Fog still drifted in patches, but the wreck of the Andrea Doria leaned sharply, half submerged. Her elegant hull, the pride of a nation, was now a wounded carcass in the gray Atlantic. Captain Calamai stood on the bridge, one of the last to leave. He had refused rescue until every passenger and crew he could find was safe. As he finally stepped into the lifeboat, he looked back and whispered, "I am the last to abandon ship." At 10:09 a.m., the Andrea Doria rolled completely onto her side and slipped beneath the water. It took her less than 11 hours to die. The Stockholm limped back to New York, her bow crushed inward like paper. The images of her damaged hull shocked the world. Chapter 8. Aftermath and Legacy. Investigations followed, but blame was never simple. Some pointed to the Stockholm's radar misreading. Others argued that the Andrea Doria had turned the wrong way, or that speed should have been reduced further in fog. In truth, it was a chain of human error, overconfidence, and the limits of 1950s technology. The tragedy led to new maritime safety standards, better radar training, improved collision avoidance protocols, and stricter lifeboat design requirements. As for Captain Calamai, he never sailed again. He retired quietly, haunted by the memory of that night. Years later, when divers located the wreck 250 feet below the surface, they found her still majestic, lying on her side, her name barely visible under a shroud of rust and silt. Chapter 9. Epilogue. Today, the Andrea Doria rests in darkness, 60 miles off Nantucket. Her decks are collapsing,
Her once bright murals long faded. But among divers and historians, she remains a symbol of human fallibility and human courage. Because disasters aren't just about what went wrong. They're also about what people do when everything goes wrong, and they still fight to save one another. The Andrea Doria was supposed to embody perfection. Instead, she reminded the world that even the most beautiful creations can be undone by a single moment of human error. North Atlantic, July 26, 1956. The night Italy's pride sank beneath the Atlantic.